Hello, I'm Kelsey Johnson, and I am the judge for debate number 2. Um, Basic paradigm for me, I am definitely a lay judge. I don't have debate experience, I don't have a debate background. However, I am going into my 11th year as a head speech coach. My strength is in interp and public address, and my 4th year as a congressional debate coach. But I will gladly admit that I know little to nothing about congressional debate and the actual debating that happens with the resolutions and bills in that activity. So let's jump into the actual debate, and I go into some pretty good depth in the paper that I wrote for the two debaters. So let's just touch on some stuff in a more discussion based chat. Okay. Number one is that I believe our resolution for this assignment is more Lincoln Douglas based. It is philosophical in nature. It is a moral argument or a moral debate more than it is policy um, and black and white like that. And if we break down the affirmative and negatives cases, we can see how if it would have followed more of an LD uh, style, the debate might have gone into a different route, which might have made it more fun for the two debaters. But right now, it's grounded too much in policy, I think. So the first thing that I want to say is the negative won this debate. And I think the negative wrote a better case. The negative understood the resolution a little bit better, and they were able to attack the affirmative's case better. On the flip side of that, though, I think the affirmative's rebuttal is the strongest point of the entire debate. However, for lack of a better term, the affirmative already screwed the pooch earlier in the debate, and there was really no coming back from what they had already laid out. For starters, let's look at the decision rule that the affirmative told me, the judge, to base my decision on. In the last two sentences of their decision rule, the affirmative states, quote, if I prove that violence is not accepted, no matter the reason, by using the U.S. Constitution, I will win this debate. If my opponent can prove that violence is allowed and permitted under the U.S. Constitution, they would win this debate. The negative proved that violence is allowed, and therefore they won the debate. The salient key issues that were brought up from the affirmative was looking at Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, which, ironically, the only reason we have a constitution is because of violence against the British. The main issue that I have with this contention is that it's basically not a contention because of the gross misinterpretation of what that article is actually saying. And the negative does a good job in their debate explaining why and how that is a gross misinterpretation. So, because the negative was able to prove the misinterpretation, I also had to give points to the negative for that. The affirmative also never actually proves to me at any point that the Constitution doesn't say there can't be violence. And the affirmative kind of tries to say that we have peaceful protesting, but assumes that because we have one, we can't have the other. So they say, well, in the Bill of Rights with the First Amendment, we have the right to peaceful protesting. And then they assume because of that, we can't have violence. And that is a fallacy I would have liked the negative to really attack in their debate, but they never touched on it. They just tried to prove why peaceful protests don't work. The next thing I want to go to is the negatives debate. I thought the negative did a great job of providing me with concrete examples, which is what I wanted. As the judge, I wanted you to prove to me with examples that it's acceptable. I also thought the negative took the debate more philosophically and morally. In their kind of first paragraph or so, the negative wrote, "We may not necessarily condone violence morally or even legally, but it happens around us in everyday life, and it is sometimes necessary in order to make social political changes." And the negative goes through and gives examples of why it works, examples of why peaceful protests don't work, and they also explain that Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution does allow for violence because the article says that America is going to defend America against, or is going, yeah. The article states America will defend itself against foreign invasion. It doesn't say that it can't do that with violence in the simplistic terms of guns and war and death. And the negative proves that to me in their refutation and contentions. And if I use what the affirmative told me to base my decision on, that right there is what is what solidifies my decision that the negative wins this debate. I want to go further, though, into the rebuttal. The rebuttal, I think, was the most fun part to read of this debate. It's where I think the affirmative started to feel grounded, and I can tell maybe the affirmative maybe has a strength as a debater in arguing against other people, because the first part of the debate was a lot weak, actually, and then this rebuttal comes along and kind of just like boom, right back at the negative. And I as a judge enjoyed reading the rebuttal because we finally really steep into some semantics and some moral high ground and some philosophy, and the whole affirmative's rebuttal focuses on one word: acceptable. And if the affirmative would have taken the time in their original debate to define acceptable, I think that would have helped solidify their win over the negative. Because the affirmative never says that violence isn't successful. They definitely agree with the negative that violence has created change. And they say the quote, "The original statement is violence is never an acceptable instrument of social political change. Violence may very well be successful in coming about social political change. However, the big question is if it is acceptable," end quote, ... Quote, "Just because something works and is successful does not mean that it is morally right and acceptable," end quote. I kind of want to know what the neg would say to that, because now we're sticking to what the real resolution says. Now we're getting moral, and now we're getting philosophical. And I think the affirmative would have had the argument and the win solidified, because I don't really know how you debate against the argument of what is acceptable, because successful doesn't mean acceptable. So that's kind of where my decision was coming from. That's what I was seeing as an educator and a speech coach, looking at my first debate and some of my feedback for the two of you. So thank you for the debate. I look forward to seeing what else you guys can do. If you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, I kind of spelled out everything more in detail in my written critique for you guys. So thank you.